according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Christ.
Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to those against the times, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you pay the last penny. You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery,' but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, 'Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce.' But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife except on the ground of unchastity causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord.' But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it's the throne of God, or by the earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. The gospel of our Savior.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. That's quite a laundry list in that gospel. That's a tall order. Perhaps I have shared this with you before, but I really like this. Even big ones. I love checking stuff off of my list. I have even committed the act of having already done something, then writing it on the list for the pleasure of checking it off. Guilty as charged. I think a lot of us, when we were growing up, we were taught about the Ten Commandments as a list of things you should or shouldn't do. And it's very easy to come home at the end of the day and say, well, didn't kill anybody, check that one off. I didn't envy anybody today, I checked that one off. I didn't badmouth my parents, check. I was taught as a little kid that the Ten Commandments are good for me. They're good for me. It's good for me to honor my parents. It's good for me to tell the truth. It's good for me not to have envy. It's good for me not to steal. That list we think of in terms of what's good for me. That's how we were raised. That's how I was. for purposes of this morning's discussion, I'm going to talk about those things as the outside stuff. Jesus, like Moses, goes up on the hill, and when he comes back, he talks about the law that has been given to God's people. And Jesus doesn't say, oh, forget about Moses. Forget him. He's gone. Now I'm here. He doesn't say that. And he's not asking us to give up the 10 Commandments. But he does say it's not enough to go home at night, get out your Sharpie, wipe off your little laminated list, and check off, I did not kill anybody today, and say it's all good. He says, yes, those commandments are good for you. But it's what's on the inside, the hatred, the jealousy, the anger. Those things, not only are they not good for you, they're not good for the community. It's what happens in here, what lives rent-free in here and in here that benefits the community. That's the inside stuff. I don't want to talk about the inside stuff. The inside stuff makes me uncomfortable, right? I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the outside stuff. That's easy, right? Because I can check off my list. I can show my list to people. I could make a cross stitch of it. You get to show that to other people. But it's that inside stuff, that hard stuff. That's what Jesus is talking about. So he's taking the law, which was written in stone, and he puts flesh and bone in it. He puts life into it. Because God, writing the law on our hearts, gives us not hearts of stone, but hearts of flesh, living hearts. So this is hard work. We don't want to do this. We just want to check off that list. And Jesus says, if it's that stuff that makes you boil over, that you allow to live inside you, that's what draws you further away from keeping those commandments. It's all that other stuff on the inside. It's not about what you show other people. And in that culture, at the time Jesus was speaking, there were a lot of religious people in the temple who were seen as examples of good behavior. It was what they showed on the outside that mattered. And even last week he said, you need to be more righteous than the people who look righteous before you will enter the kingdom of heaven. And here's how you do it. This week is a continuation of that. It says this is how you do that. You have to look at the inside stuff, the stuff that's good for the community. As I read this scripture, it is very easy for me to think about all the headlines I've heard recently, and I don't have to go too far down into the pile of newspapers to read about someone who shows us what the effect of holding hatred and anger and jealousy in the heart can do. And every time I hear those headlines, I pray, please, Lord, never again. Please. But sure enough, it happens again. How far back in the news do you have to go before you see a headline involving someone with a hashtag #MeToo attached to their names? Someone who has been objectified into a thing for the benefit, pleasure, and satisfaction of someone else, usually someone in power over them. Doesn't take long to look for and find any news article about someone who tells you one thing and has done another. Or someone who says, I have done all these things, and we find out there's nothing underneath it to back any of that up. Doesn't take long. You see, it's not about the outside stuff, it's about the inside stuff. And the world wants to tell you, the world wants you to believe that what's on the outside is what matters. What's on the outside is what's real. Go on social media and you'll see it. And we get fooled into this sense that these other people are living these wildly perfect lives, these curated lives. And what you don't see is what's behind what the camera's taking the picture of, right? The toys on the floor, and the barking dog, who may need a little more training. You can't hear the neighbors. You can't see everything else going on because everything that we see in social media is what someone has decided you're going to see. The world wants us to believe that all of that is true. And Jesus comes in and says, yeah, that stuff's not true. The outside stuff is not true. Now, the 10 Commandments, they're good for you. It's true. They are. They're good for you, but they're good for you. It's the work that you do on the inside that's good for the community in which we find ourselves. And that's what we're here for, right? That's where we find ourselves, in the community. I said a while ago that when people walk in those doors, ultimately, they're looking for Jesus. And that's true. And every week, when we celebrate Eucharist, when we come in and sit down, we bring ourselves. We bring the person who went to work all week. We bring the person who might have been on vacation. We bring all of our prayers, all of our thoughts. We bring backpacks for kids who want to support. We bring food. We bring money. We bring bread and wine. All of these things are ordinary things. We bring them in and we put them at the altar. And if that were the end of the story, that would be it. But it's Jesus who makes those things whole. It is Jesus who changes those things from mere items, from mere traits about ourselves, into something holy and full of love. Something that can change the world. Paul tells us in Romans, in chapter 7, that he really likes the law. He likes God's law, and he wants to do it, but he can't. He can will himself to do it, but he just can't do it. How many of you can relate to that? And make a list, right? I'm going to do the right stuff. Sure enough, I do the stuff that's not on the list. He says, I set out to do the right thing, and I end up doing the wrong thing. And when I tell myself I'm not going to do the wrong thing, I end up doing it anyway, because sin is right there, waiting to trip me up. I do it so often, you could set a watch by it and do it on schedule. That's how bad it is. It's like Paul's watching me do it. I sit there and I get uncomfortable. My goodness, how can he know? Because that's who we are. That's how we are. And if that were the end of it, that would be a very sad story. But Paul reminds us that it is Jesus Christ who changes all of that for us. It is Jesus who changes us. And so what lives rent-free can be replaced with Jesus. It's Jesus who makes us holy. It's Jesus who takes us, very ordinary, very error-prone people, and makes us into something extraordinary and holy and able to change the world. So when people walk in this door and they look for Jesus, we can find him. He meets us right where we are. And he takes what's ordinary and turns it into something holy. And then we get to go back out that door and we get to share what is holy and what is good with everybody else that we meet those who aren't going to end up walking through those doors. That's the good news. The good news is, right, that we can be transformed into something good for the community. We are given choices every day. We're given choices between this or that. Do I do this or do I do that? I want to do this, but I end up doing that. But we're making choices. And there's conflict there. There's conflict in every choice. There was a woman, a journalist, a radio broadcaster from the early 20th century. Her name was Dorothy Thompson. She was expelled from Nazi Germany. And she has an interesting quote that I want to share with you about that. She says that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of creative alternatives for responding to conflict. Alternatives to passive or aggressive responses, and alternatives to violence. The world tells us how it is because of what you see. And Jesus says it's not what you see that is. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of creative, life-giving, not destructive and life-destroying. Creative and life-giving alternatives. So we replace what is naturally living in there, and we invite Jesus in. And he makes us much more than ordinary. He makes us holy. He makes us righteous. More righteous than the people who look like they're doing the right thing. So we may not always look like it, but when we have Jesus living in you, that's what helps push us closer and closer to accomplishing those very good things, helping us with that list. I want to check stuff off on. That's my prayer for all of us, that we can invite Christ in to live in those places where there are those choices, those conflicts, and open ourselves to his peace and those creative ways that we can respond to those conflicts. Amen.